Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Rusty. Libby Gober is on her way up. She's going to offer our invocation. And while she's on the way, I will go ahead and say that please remember your cart buckets on your tables.
Stephen is a little taller than me. I apologize for a sinus infection. My voice is a little raspy, but we'll get through it. As I pray in my faith, I ask you to pray in yours. Most gracious God, we humbly bow before you, thanking you for our many blessings, one of which is that we can assemble here freely without fear. Let us never forget those who came before us, who fought and sacrificed that we could enjoy those freedoms. Bless this food that we are about to receive to our bodies and us to your service. Forgive us when we fail you, Lord, and make us ever mindful of where our many blessings come from. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Libby, and get well soon. Beth Barlow? Beth is on the way up. She has taken on the task of introducing all our visiting Rotarians and guests this month. She's going to do so again today. Beth.
Good afternoon. We have 2 visiting Rotarians today. If you'll stand when I call your name so we can see who you are. Jeff Keller from Athens, Georgia. He's still getting his meal, okay? And the other is Jim Hudson from Columbia East, who I think probably hasn't made it in either. But let's welcome both of these visitors. If you have a guest with you, would you please stand with your guest and introduce yourself and your guest, and the mic will come around to you.
Hello, I'm Louisa Campbell, and I'm delighted to have as my guest today one of our former Rotary scholars, Dr. Bo Bryan. He's in Greenwood, but I hear he might be living back in Columbia.
I'm Libby Gober, and I am delighted to introduce to you someone who is actually a guest of Ann Walker. I don't know if Ann has made it or not. She knew she was going to be running late or may not make it, so she asked me to introduce Thoy Warren. Thoy is the relatively new executive director for the Babcock Center, and ironically enough, he's a dear friend of my sister's, and I've known him for about 30 years. So when Ann asked me to introduce him, we realized this is nothing new. But please welcome Thoy.
I'm Adam Jordan. I'm honored to have David Jordan here with me. He's the former president of the St. Andrews Rotary Club, but more importantly, my dad.
And I'm blessed to have with me today 2 wonderful young men. To my right is my son, Malik Morris, and to my left is Cornelius Walton. Right now we have a training school in Atlanta, and he's in his 2nd year of training to be an officer in the Salvation Army. So people welcome him.
I'm Carrie Powers, and today I have my friend Kay Hampton Fogel with me, and I've known Kay for a very long time. She and her husband are entrepreneurs, and they have a company called 3rd Generation Electrical, and she's a project manager with them, so please welcome her.
I'm Bob Preston. I've got somebody who most of you know, Tommy, who is a former board member of this club and obviously a former member, and he's also in the Salvation Army. He's chairman of the advisory board of the Salvation Army. That plug as well. I also have my shorter son, Brandon, who is the co-owner of Marine 360, which is one of the fastest growing boat dealerships throughout the Southeast. Tommy is here today because after 3 seconds I'm going to have my own. Not hear about that.
Hello, I'm Jim Morris, CEO for South Carolina Council on Economic Education, and I have here with me Dev Smith. He's our intern, and he's finishing up in the IT field in December. He's been creating a thumb drive with a lot of free resources that we will give to teachers of economics or financial literacy, K-12 teachers. Quite a project, and we're very thankful that he's with us.
it's great to have so many visitors with us today, and we invite you to come back anytime. I'm going to introduce again Dr. Bo Bryan. Bo is a recipient of our Rotary Scholarship, and I want to just thank Louisa for bringing him here today, and also thank Kay Shaw for all the work they're doing. One of the things we're trying to do is bring back some of our past recipients so we can check in with them and see what's going on in their lives, and we have a fine example with us here today, Dr. Bo Bryan.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come back and do something that's long overdue, which is just to thank everybody in the Rotary Club for giving me an opportunity that you did through the scholarship, which I was thinking this morning was a full 12 years ago, which is sort of hard to believe because I'm still in school. Yeah, my name is Bo Bryan. My brother Wills was here a few weeks ago and insisted that I consider, and of course I insisted on coming back to sort of share my story. With the scholarship assistance, I attended Wofford College in Spartanburg, had 4 wonderful years there, obtaining a degree in biology, after which I came back home here to complete medical school here at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, and in between studying, spent many a Saturday right next door cheering on the Gamecocks through some of the best times I can remember in South Carolina football history. Most recently, I just completed family medicine training in Greenwood, South Carolina at Self Memorial, where I still live currently. I've just started a extra year of fellowship training in sports medicine, where I'll work with Lander and Erskine athletes as well as area high school student athletes, which is incredibly enriching. I just got married a few months ago to Frances Ellerby, also a Columbia native who still works here as an environmental engineer. We're very excited to move back next year, as long as I can find a job. So that's on our horizon. Thank you for your time. I know you guys have a very busy agenda with speakers, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for believing in me and having faith in a young 17-year-old. And I think every day about how I can repay my community. So thank you again, and please continue to help people like me who, private education, medical school education is simply not possible without the charity of others. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bo. That's really inspiring. It's great to hear. Also, always good to have another Wofford Terrier up at the podium. I too was a biology major at Wofford. I ended up working for a health plan. You ended up as a physician, so that's fantastic. And I'm sure you won't have any trouble finding a position in Columbia next year, because we need as many primary care physicians as we can find. Major Henry Morris. Major, you have health and happiness today. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. Just a little bit. Well, I'm blessed to be able to bring you health and happiness today. As we know, we know that part of health is family. And it's important that we cherish family and cherish the life of family when God gives us family. And I want to just share a little something as regards to family to share. And just want to share this with you that I got. With a timid voice and idolized eye, the little boy greeted his father. And as he returned from work, he said, "Daddy, how much do you make an hour?" Greatly surprised, but giving his boy a glaring look, the father said, "Look, son, not even your mother knows that. Don't bother me now. I'm tired." "But Daddy," he said, "just tell me, please, how much do you make an hour?" The boy insisted. The father, finally giving up, replied, $20 per hour. "Okay, okay, Daddy, okay. Could you loan me $10? The boy asked. Showing relentless and positively disturbed, the father yelled, "So that's the reason why you asked me how much I earn? Is that right? Go to sleep. Don't bother me anymore." So all right, it was dark, and the father was meditating on what he had said and was feeling guilty as to what he had said to his son. Maybe he thought his son wanted to buy something, who knows? Finally, trying to ease his mind, the father went to his son's room. And he said, "Are you asleep, son?" And his son, to his father said, "No, Daddy. Why do you ask?" replied the boy, partially asleep. "Here's the money you asked for earlier," the father said. "Thanks, Daddy," rejoiced the son, while putting his hand under his pillow and removing some money. "Now, I have enough. Now, I have $20, he excited. The boy said to his father, who was gazed at his son, confused at what his son had just asked. So he said, Daddy, could you sell me an hour of your time?" You know, that is important that we cherish family. It's healthy when we have to realize that family is important. So that's one of the healthy things that help us grow as part of a body of believers, to know that it's important that God's given us family and how important that is. So that's my help for the day. One day I have another report as related to Mr. JT. Mr. JT is out of the hospital. Praise God, he's out of the hospital. And he's doing fine. And he's going to be heading back to, he's going to be flying back to Colombia on September the 1st. So I want to keep him in your prayers, and he thank everyone for your prayers as well. So that's on Mr. JT. At this time, I want to share with you a little happiness, I call it, but sometimes it goes a little bit above happiness. And I want to share that with you. And this one is talking about the obstacles in our path. In ancient times, a king had his men place a boulder on the roadside. And he then hid in the bushes, and he wanted to watch to see if anyone would move the boulder out of the way. So some of the king's wealthiest merchants and couriers passed by and simply walked around the boulder. Many people blamed the king for not keeping the roads clear, but none of them did anything about getting the stone removed. One day, a peasant came along carrying vegetables. Upon approaching the boulder, the peasant laid down his burdens, laid down his groceries, and tried to push the stone out of the way. With much pushing and much straining, he finally was able to manage to push the boulder out of the way. After the peasant went back to pick up his vegetables, he noticed a purse lying in the road where the boulder had been. The purse contained many gold coins and a note from the king explaining that the gold was for the person who removed the boulder from the road. So the moral of the story is this. Every obstacle that we come across gives us an opportunity to improve our circumstances. And while the laziness complaining people are doing what they do, others are creating opportunities through their kind hearts, their generosity, and their willingness to get things done. And may that be in our hearts and our minds. And my last one here is this. I want to share this with you. And it's entitled, "The Old Man Lives in the Village." Now, an old man lived in the village, and the whole village was tired of him. They were so tired of this man because he was always complaining. He was always gloomy. He was always grumpy. And he constantly complained and was always in a bad mood. Now, the longer he lived, the vilder he became, and the more poisonous were his words. Now, people did their best to avoid him because of his misfortune. His misfortune was very contagious, and they didn't want to be a part of that. So they tried to avoid him. You see, he created a feeling of what they call unhappiness in others. But one day, when he turned 80, an incredible thing happened. Instantly, everyone started hearing rumors of this man. This old man was happy. Get that. He was very happy. He doesn't complain anymore about anything. He's smiling, and even his face freshened up. Get that. So the whole village gathered around the man and asked him, "Sir, we got to ask you a question. We've been knowing you for a while, and you've been quite grumpy. But so what happened to you? Well, the old man replied, nothing special. 80 years I've been chasing happiness and it was useless. And then I decided to live without happiness and just enjoy life. And that's why I'm happy now. So the moral of this story is this, people. We need to learn to live life to the fullest because we know that it's not promised to us. But the opportunity that you and I have, that we're given life, may we live and live it to the fullest. Thank you.
Enjoy your stories. We have a special program today. We have an induction, the first one that's taking place under my watch, so I'm excited about it. Past President Michael Kahn, you would come and take over.
Thank you, and I'd like to invite to the dais today a special guest of our Rotary Club, Bob Helms, and to sponsor Rusty to Pass. If y'all would come up and face the club for an induction and an introduction. I know you'll want to get to know Bob's name and his face and welcome him graciously into our club. So, Robert M. Helms goes by Bob, and he is sponsored by Rusty. Turn around so they can see your pretty face. There you go.
Not you, Rusty.
No, not Rusty, but Rusty should get some kind of award, though. He's probably done more good jobs around here than anybody else in our club. Robert, though you will be expected, if you ever mount this podium, to deliver a squeaky clean Presbyterian version of health and happiness, like Rusty does. You do want to follow in his footsteps with regard to other examples that he has set in this club. For example, he, in addition to being your sponsor today for this ceremony, he might have just as well been up here doing the health and happiness report in his own sort of special, inimitable version of that. And he plays the piano, as you notice, which is a real distinct talent. Now, since you're following in his footsteps, we fully expect you as a new member next week to be playing the piano for us. Okay. All right. I tried to find some way to mispronounce Bob's name, as that's sort of a long-standing tradition in this club. But it's a bit straightforward. Bob Helms is a little bit straightforward even for me to mess up. But that's okay. I think having Rusty as his sponsor is probably enough embarrassment for Bob as it is. Coming to us from a variety of home places, Bob, in one of his most recent home places, has been Greensboro, where he's been a member of the sales and marketing executives up there. He's also a career exec for Exxon Corporation. Imagine that, 36 years with Exxon. He even outlived the Valdez. Bob, can't think about that. Bob, who holds a BS from USC, is married to Caroline, and he lives on Kilburn Road, right next to David Cinema's former residence, and not too far from Kilburn Park Baptist. You might find him there at home in the yard where he enjoys doing work, or you might find him at the gym where he likes to work out. 2, 9, and 2. Bob has 2 daughters. He has a total of 9 grand and step grandkids. And he's got 2 great-grands. And 1 on the way, I hear. And now, if the 2 of you would face me as you are, and Rusty will fix the pin on your lapel. These pins, Bob, are great conversation openers, and they're recognized worldwide. And I encourage you to wear yours daily, perhaps fixing an additional pin on each of your jackets. Rusty was able to do that by purchasing 2 Rotary pins. We welcome you to Rotary, and to the Columbia Rotary Club in particular, and we would know that you're joining a global force of 1.2 million Rotarians, and they're all engaged in things as broad and worldwide as global peace and understanding, or as local as helping somebody like Bo get a scholarship to get through school. You'll find the Rotarians, as Henry indicated, are the guys that are moving the boulders out of the road. And we're glad to have you as a part of our club. A couple of things on your way to getting here today. I know that you have been brought to meetings by Rusty. You've had a meeting with the past president. And you will have, if you haven't already received a due statement, you'll be getting that. And then the last hurdle will be to join us in the fireside chat, which is when? Tonight. And you're invited to that. Hope you can certainly make that. And we all want to welcome you to Columbia Rotary.
Thank you, Michael. Bob, welcome to the club. We look forward to seeing you tonight at the fireside chat. A couple of club announcements. Fireside chat starts at 6 o'clock tonight, so my wife and I look forward to hosting you. The board had our first meeting of the year on Thursday, and we approved the budget for the Rotary year, so that's an obvious thing that we need to do every year, and something that we got done relatively quickly. Also wanted to make you aware of 2 resignations. We don't typically talk about this at meetings, but I do want to make members aware when people resign. It's always great to have new members. We need to be aware when old members choose to leave. Walt Carton resigned from the club, and also Terrence and Gary. So we will miss both of them. So if you see them in the community, just make sure you let them know they're welcome back anytime. And now, past President Robin, where are you, Robin? We've got one more special part of the program today. We're going to welcome some Paul Harris Fellows.
Thank you, President Stephen. Mason Hardy is now in charge of the Paul Harris Foundation. He could not be here today, so I have the honor of recognizing new members, new ones, but also those who are at another level. I'd ask the following people to come forward. Kay Shaw, David Campbell. David, I did not see. Is he here? I did not see him. Oh, there he is. Yeah, David, we've tried for weeks to get you here. And finally you're here. Thank heavens. Good. Also, I would ask Bob Crutchfield and Brandon and Tommy Crutchfield to come forward. And while they're coming forward, I'll go ahead and tell you that both David and Kay have reached a new level with their Paul Harris. And Kay is receiving a Paul Harris +1. And David is receiving a Paul Harris +2. And I'd like to tell you that Bob Crutchfield, who is a multiple Paul Harris, and also Tommy, you're a former member of the club, and you have Paul Harris status. So here's what we here's what we're doing today. Bob, you have honored both. You have honored Brandon with a Paul Harris Fellow. I'll let you give that to the button.
And this one, next one, Tommy's already got one, but we also have one for my daughter, Connie.
I'm coming to that, Bob. Just give me a chance. Wow, I'm trying to do this slowly so you all get the full recognition. Okay, here we go. Now, just give Bob's daughter, Connie Crutchfield, Pittard. Then Brandon is, Tommy is accepting this on behalf of her. And while we're here, let me just say that, those of you who are Paul Harris, you are able to, at some point, if you want to honor someone by Paul Harris recognition, this can certainly be done. I want to thank all of you very, very much for your Paul Harris status. And I would like for all Paul Harris Fellows to please stand. All Paul Harris Fellows, please stand. Now, I'm going to go a step further. There are many of you in this room have begun your contribution to Paul Harris, but you haven't reached that first level of $1,000. You can do this very easily. I would like all of you who have begun your Paul Harris climb to your first, to please stand and be recognized also. There are a number of you who are doing that. Please stand. Okay, great, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. We appreciate you pitch hitting there for Mason today. And congratulations to all our Paul Harris awardees. Now it's time for our speaker, who is a familiar face. Certainly love to have her back. And past President Roger Stroop is going to introduce her today.
Thank you, President Stephen. This is a Wofford Day. I'm also a Wofford graduate, but I just attended my 50th college reunion, so a little bit further back. It's my privilege today to introduce Robin Waits. I've known Robin for many, many years. She followed me as Director of Historic Columbia. I was there from 1974 to 79, and then we were smart enough to also hire her at the State Museum in 1996. Robin is a resident of Columbia. She was born here. She has a degree from Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont, where she received a Bachelor of Arts with a double major in Art History and Russian. She received a Master of Arts in Art History from the University of South Carolina and subsequently began work at the South Carolina State Museum. She served in a variety of capacities, including the Chief Curator of Art, which was her position when she left the State Museum to go to Historic Columbia in 2004. Robin is an active member in the community, serving on the board of Delta House, Civil Rights Center at the University of South Carolina, and the South Carolina Dharma Group. Please join me in welcoming Robin Waits.
I'm not a Wofford grad, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to be coming here today. Well, it's nice to be back. Thank y'all for having me this afternoon. I'm going to just talk a little bit about historic Columbia and then dive right into the work that we have been doing over the past couple of years at the Hampton Preston site. In 1 second. So many of you know, I know a lot of y'all have family members or individually have been involved with Historic Columbia. We were founded in 1961 thanks to a grassroots effort to save the building that you see on the screen today. It was known then as the Ainsley Hall House. And the goals in establishing this organization really was to kind of keep this site from falling to the wrecking ball, but also to preserve key elements of Columbia's history for future generations and to use the site to educate visitors on our local history. Really the fundamental facets on which the organization was established in 1961 are still the foundation of the work that we do today. Advocacy, preservation, education are the cornerstones, but we certainly have significantly expanded both the physical and programmatic footprint to tell a much broader story of Columbia and Richland County. We have 3 major strategic goals as an organization. The first is to be the leader in the stewardship of historic sites, both those that we manage and those that other people have the responsibility for. To engage and inspire the community through dynamic and inclusive programs, and to have the organizational capacity to do those things. So our first goal in terms of historic site stewardship is to manage 6 sites, which range in age from the Siebel's House, whose earliest foundation stood in 1796, to the 1890s Majeska Simpkins House. And using the buildings and grounds, we address local, statewide, and national history from Columbia's founding through the civil rights movement and the social justice era. So this is a unique aspect of our organization, is that we can address such a broad span of time within a really small geographic area. So those are the major sites that we manage, and you can walk very easily among 200 years of local history. So over the past decade, we have greatly expanded our programmatic offerings to meet the strategic goal, which is to engage and inspire the community through dynamic and inclusive programs. The range is broad. We do behind-the-scenes tours of preservation projects, summer camps, happy hour history Sunday strolls through historic neighborhoods. We do an annual festival that celebrates Black history and culture, holiday programs, garden workshops, and symposia. Over 100 events and programs on top of the daily tours of the house museums that we manage. And since the organization's founding, taking care of historic buildings, as I mentioned, has been really a key part of the mission, but it wasn't until the early 2000s that we began to take a much more active role in advocating for preservation beyond the sites that we manage. So these efforts began in earnest with the Brennan Building in the early 2000s, which today houses Blue Flower Bakery in Bourbon. Our engagement continued to evolve with projects such as the Palmetto Compressed Warehouse, Kensington Mansion, and today along the 1600 block of Main Street, all of which are projects that are really booming because of the retention and celebration of the historic assets that are there. So strategically, we're moving in positive directions on all fronts. Today I'm going to focus on the stewardship of the sites that we manage. So Historic Columbia, as I mentioned, manages 6 historic sites, one of which we own. The other 2 are owned by Richland County and the City of Columbia. Thank you, Libby Gober. Over the last 7 years, thanks to the support from the city and county, we've had the opportunity to conduct major capital improvements, as well as to make important interpretive shifts. In 2014, following a $3.5 million rehabilitation of the Woodrow Wilson family home, we reopened the site as a museum of reconstruction. This is a period during which the home was built, and when young Tommy, who was later known as Woodrow Wilson, lived in Columbia. This is the only site in the country to holistically address the Reconstruction era, this pivotal yet commonly misunderstood and misrepresented decade in American history. 2 years later, we cut the ribbon on new exhibits at the Mann-Simon site, which now fully utilizes information uncovered during a 6-year archaeological investigation of the property. Acquired by a free Black couple in the 1830s, we share the story of Celia Mann and Ben Delane, as well as stories of the 4 generations of this family that owned the property through 1970. At the Mann-Simon site, we focus on the rise of the Black middle class during the Jim Crow South. So as I hope is clear, if you look at those interpretive shifts at Wilson and at Mann-Simon's, Historic Columbia is committed to telling a much more inclusive and authentic story at the historic sites that we manage. So approaching the 200th anniversary of the construction of Hampton Preston, we move towards assessing the site's building and grounds and the tour narrative. Our goal is to deliver a balanced narrative that represents all voices of the people who lived and worked at this site. We have 3 major elements to the site's rehabilitation: the building, the grounds, and the interpretation. So much of that capital work at this 200-year-old structure took place behind the scenes, underground, in the basement, in the attic, where environmental degradation was most apparent. And that's expensive, but not very much fun to talk about. The most compelling has been the reintroduction of the building's mid-19th century appearance, both inside and out. Contractors brought back the long-forgotten warm earth tones that once complemented the property's renowned gardens. Inside, paint analysis led to a deeper knowledge of the interior's evolving aesthetics, including an 1830s wall treatment that mimics cut stone or ashlar. The building's main hall also now features a reproduction of early 19th century oil floor cloth. One of the primary character-defining features of this site under the Hampton and subsequent Preston ownership was the landscape. This is an image from the 1872 bird's eye map of Columbia. The area in red is the Hampton Preston estate. And this is the 4-acre site that was one of the most renowned gardens in the region, and one of the many ways that the property owners exhibited their wealth. The gardens, established and maintained by enslaved laborers, was documented in letters, poems, as well as newspaper and journal articles, which included descriptions of specific plants and design elements, as well as general peacefulness and beauty of the site. And this is an image from an 1873 Harper's Weekly that shows the gardens that they described as boxwoods. In this image, we actually think that they were cherry laurels, because who's ever seen a boxwood? That been Margaret Clarkson, maybe. Thanks to the extensive documentation from the mid-19th century up to the destruction of the gardens in 1947, as well as to a major donation from the Susan and Darnell Boyd Foundation, Historic Columbia has been able to piece together and recreate a garden design that reflects this 1850s treasure. These are some images from the garden following its most recent rehabilitation. In the front quadrant of the garden, we established a children's garden. So it's not like you would see at the zoo, where you've got some slides and plastic implements that kids can play on. But it's implements in the garden that are all kid size. So the mazes are just about knee height, so you can see your kids running around. There's a pump, old-fashioned pump for kids to play with. We also placed this contemporary gazebo within that space as well. We do storytelling in the gardens with the Richland Library on a quarterly basis in that space. It's also available for rentals. So we still have about a quarter of that site to build out, but are enjoying watching the plant materials mature over the season. We host, as I mentioned, a myriad of public programs, and it's great just to watch people take advantage of this free, open, public green space in the city center. So the final change to the site has been the story that we tell inside. So about 4 years ago, I was standing outside of Hampton Preston after a candlelight tour, which we do on an annual basis. And I was talking with some folks who had just visited the site, and a young couple came out of the building who I know well, who's been friends of Historic Columbia for many years. John Dozier and his wife, and John used to be a member of the club if he isn't still. John and Victoria have 3 really wonderful children, and they were all in tow, and Victoria came beeline straight up to me and said, "This is just not acceptable. I just took my kids on a tour of this site, and you didn't talk at all about the people who built this building, and they didn't talk at all about how the people who enjoyed this site during the holidays were able to do that because of the enslaved labor." And we knew that. We had already been making these changes at other sites, but we hadn't gotten to Hampton Preston just yet. So that was one of the catalysts, at least for me, to really push this project forward. And today, when you enter the home, as these folks were doing during the first day of tours at the site, you experience the renovations that underscore the wealth of the white families who lived here, and the extraordinary skill and craftsmanship of the enslaved people who built and maintained this house. You're introduced to Maria and William Walker, siblings who were enslaved workers, and you meet John and Caroline Preston, the married couple who owned them. You learn about the time, the energy, and expertise that it took to run this extensive household and the 4-acre estate. You see maps and wills, census records, photographs, and portraits that encourage critical thinking about whose history is preserved, how it is recorded, and how a person's story is told. The tour setup statement is as follows. On today's tour, we will explore the people who lived and worked at the site, including dozens of enslaved individuals, antebellum elite family members, and those who lived or stayed here in the decades that followed the Civil War. We use the term enslaved persons, or people, because it gives greater identity to who these people were. They were not just slaves or property, but were human beings in the condition of slavery. They still had families and skills and intellect and desires, and this term provides a more accurate description of who they were. When we have names, we use them, but there are a few primary resources that include this information. The key shift at this site is today we offer a balanced narrative of the site. We address race and class and gender. No one story is privileged over the other. white, wealthy, and male, no longer hold sway. So on the main floor of the site, we move through the decades from the home's 1818 construction by Ainsley Hall, which was built to serve as a showplace for the English merchants' wealth and wares. The home was built by enslaved workers. 5 years later, Wade Hampton I and his third wife, Mary Canty, purchased the site and moved there with their 6 children. Enslaved workers were brought to this site from the Woodlands plantation to serve the family and to maintain the house and gardens. We address living conditions for white and black families, the emergence of Southern foodways as well as technology and the expansion of the main house in the 1850s. One of the most enlightening primary resources that we have in the interpretation is Mary Canty Hampton's will. She died in 1863, and that's a stereoscopic image of her. She was pretty, wasn't she? I'm just kidding, can't really see her. So in her will, included a listing of 31 enslaved people, including 4 families, and that's a handwritten will on the right. They were listed as schedule of property, as was her 427-piece silver set. And in her attempt to divide the people and objects equitably in her will among her daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren, she separated members of each enslaved family. Upstairs at the site, we now address initially the end of the Civil War. We talk about the radical shift in class structure in the South, the emancipation of the enslaved people, and white Southerners' reconciliation of loss and memory that results in a claim that the South's struggle in the Civil War was heroic and just, while denying slavery as central to the conflict. We then move into the late 19th and early 20th century occupation of the site. From 1890 to 1930, the property was used as a women's college under several names, one of which was Chicora College, which is now Queens College in Charlotte. The interpretive space reflects a dorm room. Students here were wealthy, upper-class white women. Black men and women were employed on campus, as you can see from the yearbooks here. But they weren't allowed to attend schools, these schools. 3 blocks away, however, separate educational institutions, Benedict and Allen, were established for black students. In 1944, this building became a boarding house. It was owned by Thomas Hare. The site's connection with the Hampton family helped boost its marketing efforts to white travelers who were able to stay there. It was, of course, not available to black travelers who may have stayed at a black-owned tourist home listed in the Green Book, or the Negro Traveler's Guide, and this is one of the sites that was in that book. The Majeska Simpkins site is one that we manage today. This was a hotel that she owned. So as a tourist home, this building closed in 1966, and the site was purchased by the state of South Carolina to serve as the Midlands host for the South Carolina Tricentennial Exposition. This is an image just before or during its rehabilitation during that time. And between April of 1970 and June of 1971, more than 135,000 people visited the mansion and these 2 geodesic domes that were built as part of that, the future of South Carolina. It was known as the Midlands Exposition Center. And I want to point out, just while this image is up, you can see that the 4-block area that was once that very lavish garden by the 1970s was parking lots, a number of buildings that were both associated with the college, but other buildings on the Laurel Street side that was an apartment building. So in order to recreate the landscape that we have, we had to really completely reimagine that space. This is what it looked like in 1980. By 72, the site was under the stewardship of Historic Columbia and operating at that point as a historic house museum. So we are here now 46 years later. The Hampton Preston site certainly offers visitors a full picture of what it meant to live and work at an urban antebellum estate. And that picture that we offer represents every person associated with this important historic place. And I want to just take the opportunity to invite you to come to visit Hampton Preston and the other sites that we manage, because when you do, you certainly will see yourself reflected there. And I am more than happy to answer a couple of questions at additional time. And thank you all again for having me. It was Chicora College before it was Queens, so when it moved to Charlotte, it became.
Robert.
Yes.
During that 1890 to 1930 period when several educational schools, wasn't Columbia Theological Seminary, was that the period they were there?
They were across the street at the Robert Mills site, Ainsley Hall. Yeah.
What were the other colleges that were there?
The Presbyterian College for Women, and then there was, after Chicora College left, the Westerveld Home for Boys was at that site. Yeah, John.
How much of your funding comes from private donations and public partnerships and rentals and income from that?
So because 5 of our 6 sites are owned by the city and the county, we're under contract with those to manage them as historic sites. So they provide resources for us to do that. About 60% of our money, just under 60%, comes from the city and the county. Just under 10% comes from rentals. And an even smaller portion of that actually comes from the gate. So the remainder of that is raised through corporate funding as well as individual memberships and private donations. Jim?
I know your mother-in-law was a great artist, and you live very close to a lady named Jenny Dreer. Could you explain her involvement in this thing?
Jenny Dreer, Andrew. Jim is asking about Jenny Dreer's involvement with this organization. She was one of the founding members of the organization, and certainly a large part of why the Robert Mills site was preserved. One of a small group of people who were really invested in ensuring that these character-defining buildings remained intact and that what they were available to the public. So she was key to what happened in 1960 and 61.
She was very active in it. I remember she raised a lot of money.
She raised a lot of money and a lot of cane. Those were the 2 things that Is that accurate, Roger?
Do you need assistance rebuilding the garden? Is there any way we can help?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, we manage 14 acres of landscape within these sites, and we have reestablished period-appropriate gardens at each of our properties. That's part of a cultural landscape master plan that's been in the works for about 10 years, and Hampton Preston was sort of the final piece of that puzzle. In addition to our 2 full-time and 1 part-time staff, we have a volunteer crew of about 12 people who come twice a week and work with our guys in the gardens from like 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. They work in all of the sites, they learn a lot. They're a very close-knit group of folks, so we always love to have volunteers who come to work at the properties.
Can we just go to the site to actually get
involved in
that?
Yeah, so you have this little card that says join the conversation on, you may, if you didn't get one of these, I've got more of these. These have all of our social media handles, so if you're interested in getting to know more about the organization, it's got information about joining as a member, but the volunteer information is at the website, which is listed on that join card as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Roger.
I'm Sam, since I don't have a loud voice. My great-grandfather was a graduate of Columbia Theological Seminary. He was a student there during the time that Woodrow Wilson's father was president of the seminary. Coming fast forward though, my son, children, 2 youngest children attended the summer camp that you all did, and I know he wanted me to tell everybody, so you all are going to hear it first. Well, not first, but you need to hear this. He said it was the best camp, for those of you who have children and grandchildren, he said it was the best camp, and these children are 8 and 9 years old, that his children have attended. And he said, Mother, please recommend it to everyone. He said it was absolutely fabulous.
Thank you. I'll pay you later.
What does it cost a year to maintain that? Where do you get your money?
City and county, and then private donations and corporate donations. Those all help us.
What do you estimate it costs to maintain it, keep it up?
The gardens or the organization itself? Yeah, our budget is about $1.8 million annually. Yes, ma'am.
My question, you've got a lot of walking tours. Can you just talk about those a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, we got a big grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and established a program called Connecting Communities Through History, which enables us to go out into neighborhoods and document stories of all kind of folks who live in different historic areas. So we started with 6 historic neighborhoods that were all city center located, Cottontown, Arsenal Hill, Heathwood, and 3 others. From there, it's grown. We now have 22 walking tours that go out on a monthly basis. There are Saturday strolls and Sunday strolls. In addition to being guided walking tours, we've got print pieces, so you could do a self-guided walking tour of any of those neighborhoods or driving tour. And then we've also got web-based tours. So each of those, you can go online and click on a site. If you want to learn more about a specific house, we've got oral history interviews that are included in those tours as well. So it's really grown from kind of just walking tours of a neighborhood or a thematic tour like an African American sites tour or Jewish heritage tour to going on and really exploring from a web-based perspective. And if you're a member, those are free. Yes?
My question got you a brochure that talks about going to the gift shop to get a purchase a ticket, I guess you do. Do you purchase a ticket to each house, or you purchase one ticket and go to all of them?
You can do either.
What is it?
Yeah, so the tours are all of a single site. You can purchase tours of all 4, or you can do them individual. We're actually working on a tour now so that a person can come and purchase one ticket and get a little snippet of every single site. So it'll probably be about an hour and a half, but you get the full 200 years within that time period. Yeah.
Robin, it's great to have you back. We really appreciate what you do to preserve the historic assets of this community in Columbia, and thank you for what you're doing. We have a small token of appreciation for you and taking your time to be here today, and know you're welcome back anytime. So. President-elect Louisa, who do we have coming next week?
Next week we have another dynamic speaker. We have Mike Gula, who's the new Chief Executive of the Columbia Metropolitan Airport. So don't miss and bring a guest.
Fantastic, another great speaker. All right, we will close in song. Oh,